Hey, everybody. KC here. And I am joined today by Michael Sansolo. Michael, good to see you.
Nice to see you, Kevin.
So you may remember a few weeks ago, we did a conversation just like this, was that basically played off the book that we co-authored a few years ago called The Big Picture, Essential Business Lessons from the Movies. And we talked about the idea that we're basically going to do a new book, a sequel, and it's called The Bigger Picture, and it's about essential business and life lessons from the movies and TV and popular culture and all sorts of different things. And so this is sort of a way of testing out some of the things we are going to write about in the book. And while last time when we did The Bigger Picture, we were talking about the movies, this time we're going to talk about baseball. Because if there is if there's something that can be used as a metaphor for just about everything, it's baseball. As Robert B. Parker liked to say, it's the most important thing that doesn't matter. And so that's what we're going to talk about today and find business metaphors in baseball. And Michael, I wanted to start with an article that I read from Jeff Bisson on ESPN, in which he wrote, the 7 worst teams in baseball went 1-6 on Sunday, this is a couple of weeks ago, and were outscored by a combined 17 runs. This was no surprise. Since August 1st, when all the players dealt at the trade deadline had joined their new teams, the magnificently bad 7, the Arizona Diamondbacks, Baltimore Orioles, Chicago Cubs, Kansas City Royals, Pittsburgh Pirates, Texas Rangers, and Washington Nationals have gone 20-76 with a minus 262 run differential. The gap between those teams and the 16 that still harbor genuine playoff hopes is somewhere between between cavernous and interplanetary. And it may make the difference between a team making the postseason and spending October lamenting its misfortune. He also made the point that there's actually 7.5 teams, the half being the Colorado Rockies, which are terrible on the road, but really good when they would play them at home. And the point he was making is if you're a playoff contender, and over the next month or so of the season, you play any of those 7.5 teams, you got a much better shot at having a winning record than if you are playing, teams that are much better than that. And, for us, and I'm wearing my Mets hat, but I'm wearing the black one because I'm sort of in mourning, is that, the Mets have had a stretch now where they played basically the Dodgers, the Giants, the Dodgers, the Giants. And
it hasn't gone well.
And it has not gone well. So I think it's a really legitimate point, but the business metaphor for me is how many retailers are out there right now that are not prepared to win, that are not built to survive or thrive, that they are making it on a day-to-day basis because they did pretty well during the pandemic. But in terms of the broader picture, the bigger picture, they are not prepared to do what's necessary and spend what's necessary and invest and in the things that they need to do to survive long term.
Kevin, I want to jump off that metaphor because I think it can go in a couple of directions. I have heard retailers say for years that there is no greater advantage to business than to have a mediocre competitor. Basically, you're getting to play the Pittsburgh Pirates. And what every retailer has to recognize in this day and age, and you and I have talked about this, is we're all now playing the Los Angeles Dodgers all the time because you have this new competitor in Amazon that has a ton of money and a seeming willingness to try whatever needs to be tried because they can afford to do it.
More money. And I just want to go back to the Scott Moses, right, where he talks about the fact that if you look at the valuation, Amazon has more money than almost every major competitor combined. It means it is able to borrow money at lower rates than most countries. And you're right. It's like you're playing the Dodgers or you're playing the Yankees or the Red Sox for that matter, which is a pretty healthy payroll too, all the time. You don't get to feast on the bad teams.
But I think the other element to it, because people could be listening to us saying, well, what am I supposed to do about this? Magically develop money. I actually think, and again, this is going to take us baseball and movies at the same time. Right. I love the movie and the book Moneyball, because Moneyball tells the story of a team that operates on a small budget year after year, but they're not in the list of those dreadful 8 or 7 or 8, however we count them.
They're in first place. As we record this, they're in first place in the American League West.
They are always competitive. And that is, of course, the Oakland Athletics. And if you have seen that movie, folks, there is a great scene where Brad Pitt, who plays the key character, general manager Billy Beane, basically says he's changing the rules of how baseball operates. And when he's challenged, he says it's adapt or die. We have to become card counters at the table. We have to play a different game. We can't match the Yankees in money. Instead, what we're going to do is we're going to spend our money smarter. So even if you are a small company, small operator, and you're up against, you're thinking Amazon, Walmart, whoever it might be, how are you going to do things others can't? How are you going to differentiate yourself? And to use again the Billy Beane line, adapt or die. That's what you got to do these days.
Well, and listen, I mean, the thing is that, and there's lots of metaphors in here. It makes me crazy. And I mentioned this in the conversation that I did with Dr. Charles Steinberg of the Worcester Red Sox. You know, it makes me crazy when I'm watching a game and they put on a shift against the hitter. And like they move everybody to the right side of the infield. And it's like, well, all you have to do is, all you have to do. I know I can't do it. But if you're a professional hitter, you ought to be able to figure out how to bunt the ball down the third baseline. Because if you do that twice, they're never going to shift on you anymore. Instead, they hit 9, it seems like 8 out of 10 times they hit the ball into the shift. And from a business perspective, and I write this in the Morning News Beat all the time. I know you've written it in your column. We both talk about it when we go out and give speeches. You got to do what the competition isn't or can't do it. And there's a lot of stuff Amazon and Walmart can't do or won't do. Just because.
Absolutely. And both of us could name small operators. We both love Dorothy Lane Markets in Norman, Maine, because Norman always tries to do the different thing. And the different thing is that you don't have to be Dorothy Lane Markets. You have to find what is that difference. Unlike Kevin, I'm going to admit, I played baseball until I was a freshman in college. And by the way, I was dreadful at the end.
Rub it in.
It gets just too hard. And the notion of bunting or doing something that the other team doesn't expect is really hard. But these guys are professionals. But I think the metaphor is dead on.
And I don't usually say this, but if you're getting paid $20 million a year, learn to freaking bunt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I feel that way. And maybe that's unfair. But I think you'll learn to bunt.
And you know what? Same thing. Let's take the metaphor to business. If you are saying that we are competing on the value of A or B or C, whatever it is, and there is another competitor that takes away that advantage, which is in essence what the shift does. It is saying we're going to put extra players where you usually hit so you can't hit there. And what they're trying to do, we see this all the time, is I'm going to hit through all that stuff. You can't. There's now 7 guys to hit through. But in your business, if you're saying we're the best meat merchants ever, or you and I have both talked recently in our writings, the census just told us the population of the country has changed. And if you're going to sit there and say, darn it, I'm going to keep doing what I have always done because it has made me great. Well, you're hitting into a shift. Find a way to do the other thing. Find a way to use your metaphor to bunt in the other direction. Do the unexpected, do what will work. It's very hard to do it, but it's the path to winning.
It's interesting. I was listening to a podcast recently, and it's going to seem like a weird confluence of names, but it was a podcast hosted by the journalist John Heilemann. His guest was former Senator Claire McCaskill, and they were talking about Charles Barkley. But apparently, Charles Barkley made the observation, and I guess he was talking about football at the time, but he said it applies to every sport. Is you can look at a team at the beginning of the season and know whether it's built to succeed. And he says it's very clear. You can look at almost any league, any team, and you can tell the teams that are built to succeed. Now, they don't always succeed, right? Because things happen. Mm-hmm. You have Jacob deGrom, and he misses half a season. So things happen. And I'm not necessarily saying the Mets were built to succeed. I don't think
we can hope.
We can hope. But he says, but there are certain franchises that are built that way. In football, it's the New England Patriots, right?
Right.
Unlike, say, the New York Jets. in baseball. He says the St. Louis Cardinals are always built to succeed. Doesn't mean they always do, but they've got an organization and they put the pieces in place. And I think the same thing could be said about the Yankees. And I'm no big Yankee fan, but they've got a really good organization that's really strong about putting the pieces in place. Now, of course, you got to go out and play the games, and things happen. But I think that is something that businesses. I wonder if businesses pay enough attention to building their teams in a way that they and quite frankly, replacing the parts. It's like the Netflix model, right? They're feeling if you look at somebody who works for you and you ask yourself the question, if they came to me and said they were going to leave, would you fight to keep them? Because if you wouldn't fight to keep them, then you probably ought to let them go. Right. Which is a very cold-blooded way to come about it. But I wonder if retailers are strong enough in terms of building their teams, making sure they have the right starters, the right bench strength, all that kind of stuff.
Well, again, to build on your metaphor, the St. Louis Cardinals have been renowned through the generations that starting in their low minor leagues, they instill a certain culture so that by the time folks make it to St. Louis, their players make it to St. Louis, they put a premium on defense. They put a premium on all the fundamentals of the game. And I think, again, to make this relevant to our audience here, there are a lot of folks out there right now who I might be a store manager. I have 150 people working for me. And if 100 left, my store would improve. But right now I can't replace those 100. So we're dealing with the realities. And the only way to fight that back is you cannot recruit. When we're talking store jobs or distribution center jobs, these people do amazing work, but they're not like Jacob deGrom. They are not people at the top of their game. They're people who are doing jobs. You have to have a culture in place with leadership all the way down to the mid-level managers. That this is how we treat people. This is how we stand out and how we're special, what the goals of our company are, so that everybody knows that. I always love this story, and it's from the early 1960s, that after John F. Kennedy made his speech about we'll go to the moon this decade, and I know you love to do the vocal impersonation there, but
he was because it's hard.
You see, I set him up for this, folks. But it was Kennedy or Johnson was down at wherever they were, testing out things, and he saw a janitor sweeping the floor, and he said to the janitor, "What you doing?" And the guy said, "Putting a man on the moon." Because the mission was understood. Everybody was working toward that mission. And I think let's wrap up this metaphor as we talk about where retail is today, competing with, in essence, the Los Angeles Dodgers and the New York Yankees combined in what we have in Amazon. There has to be a culture inside companies. There has to be a common sense of purpose and mission that we are going to make every shopping trip special somehow, so that a consumer will actually say, I could do this by sitting on my sofa and just tapping on my phone, especially with COVID. I don't want to go outside. I don't want to wear a mask, all of that. But, I love how that store treats me, or I love their meats, their produce, their baked goods, their fish, whatever it might be, so that I will actually go past the easiest solution to get the great solution. And that's like bunting to the opposite field. You've got to do what's special.
It's interesting. I was watching one of the games that Mets are playing against the Dodgers, but it was the one that was on ESPN.
The one they lost.
Yeah. Well, that's several. And they were interviewing. It was the first game that Scherzer pitched against the Mets, and it was interesting. The Dodger manager was being interviewed during the game, and I guess what happened was he was telling a story about how when Scherzer came over to the Dodgers midseason, right? At what point he went out and he whatever the first inning was, he pitched for them. He went out, blew the opposition away, and came in. And Doc Roberts said, "I did what I would normally do in that case with all my pitchers. As they go by me, I swat them on the behind and say, good, nice going, well, well done, whatever." And Scherzer's response was, "Don't effing touch me." Say this to his manager. And the managers, and he said, he went over to him and said, "Did you just say?" And Scherzer looked at him and says, "My job is to go out and pitch and get people out. I don't need you to tell me good job when I do my job," which is an incredibly workmanlike way to come about it. But to sort of circle back around, I wonder if you asked a major league manager this, and I have no idea what the response would be, but it would seem to me it's a lot more important how you manage the bench players, the rookies, or the players on their way down than it is to how you manage the stars. Because the stars know what they've got to do, right? By and large. I mean, you probably, it depends on, I guess, whether they're a head case or not. But it's how you manage the people elsewhere, right? In the organization who are sitting on the bench, keeping them motivated so they're ready to go in. And it seems to me that's a good metaphor for what leadership needs to do, either at the store level or at headquarters or in a warehouse, which is, you just can't manage your middle managers. It's really important that, you're creating a team.
And you know what? The same point with a baseball team pertains to any sort of work team, because right now, more than at any time in history, we have so many different generations, so many different ethnic, racial groups, all mixing on the work team. And you can't sit there and say, all right, I have one way that I manage, and that's how I talk to everybody. And what Roberts and Scherzer realized there, certainly Roberts now knows about Scherzer. I don't talk to him the same way I talk to other pitchers. Now, no doubt there's another pitcher on the Dodgers who, if Roberts didn't say, hey, good inning, way to get him, guys, the guy would say, what are you mad at me? Did I do something? I went out, I did my job. Some thrive on that. Some don't like it. Max Scherzer happens to be a kind of singular player. He's a tremendous competitor, and his new manager will learn that about him. He doesn't require a whole lot of direction. He's basically, we all wish we had employees like Max Scherzer, because all he does is get the job done, and without any hassle.
He gets out Mets. They basically just...
Well, that's not a hard thing.
It is interesting. I mean, it's fascinating the degree to which, and this is hard to do in any business. And let's face it, baseball is a business, but it's been fascinating this season. There have been examples of how somehow the game has managed to remind us at various times that it is a game. And whether it's the Field of Dreams game, which was just utterly delightful, whether it's Ohtani, just say, it's like he's like a kid. I mean, right? I mean, it's like does what, well, I didn't get past, like 12 or 13-year-old Little League. But that's taking a different approach to playing the game. And I think that's important in management, is right. It can't always be, the guys who are or the women who it's just, nose to the grindstone kind of stuff that don't understand that people need a little light in addition to a little heat, right? That's an important thing.
Well, I think the Field of Dreams example, because I hope people had a chance to see that. First of all, it was a magnificent game, but they couldn't plan for that. It ended up being a very exciting game. It was the experience they created. And anyone who knows that movie knows the great James Earl Jones speech, where he talks about that people will be bathing in memories, that the memories and the feelings will be so thick you have to swat them away like they're mosquitoes. Baseball is an experience. And again, we're talking to food retailers. That's an experience. When you smell bread coming out of an oven, you're not thinking about, well, price of the bread, you're thinking about, wow, that smells good. I want to eat that. And it's the romance of food, the sensual nature, because these are the products that we're putting in our bodies that fuel us and our families. And so we can't discount experience. And again, I think as we're managing people, because certainly the Field of Dreams game, that wasn't a matter of the Yankees or the White Sox manager saying to their team, hey guys, we're here to do something different. They basically were there to play a baseball game, but what was around them was different. But I think when we're talking about people running food stores, that team in the food store needs to understand there's an experience to this. Yes, people are coming in because they have needs. They got to load up the pantry. They've got to balance their budget. They have to deal with time pressures. But you know what? They want, it's food, and food is not, you're not buying widgets. You're not buying, nuts and bolts. You are buying stuff that's going to go in your mouth for you, your family. It's different. And we have to understand there's more to it. It's not just numbers, it's experience.
Well, that's one of the great things that came out of the interview that I did with Dr. Charles Steinberg, the president of the Worcester Red Sox, right? Is focusing relentlessly on the customer experience.
And you know what, Kevin, I hope everyone who's watching this today goes back and rewatches that interview, because what he talks about repeatedly is the customer experience. Even to, it's kind of like accentuate the positive, eliminate the negative, that making it so you have less time on going to the bathroom, which you're at a baseball game. You have to go to the bathroom at some point. That's always the moment where you hear the crowd cheering and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I left my seat at the critical moment. Right. Or I think, as you pointed out to him, you go to buy a beer and a hot dog and you hear the crowd cheer and it's like, what now? What did I miss? He is taking friction out of those moments. So he is taking an experience and accentuating the positive and de-emphasizing the negative. And again, I think we do see that with a lot of stores, where what are the points that cause friction for a consumer? And again, another reason to worry about our own LA Dodgers, Amazon, is by making the front end experience frictionless. Consumers going to walk out of that store, and it's not like it made the prices cheaper. It just took away a hassle and turned it into a wow moment. And that's a huge advantage. And they can do it. They are doing it.
Well, although it's important to remember, listen, especially in the case of Amazon, as I reported earlier this week, right? The Amazon Fresh stores, they got a lot of technology that takes away the friction. However, the rest of the experience is kind of crappy, at least in the store I went to when I was there. So you have to look at the totality of it, and not just think that, if we make this work, it won't matter what we do over here.
Yeah, and that's again what I think with the team in Worcester. He's going to have a winning team, because at some point, people are going to want that. Right. But you control what you can control. And in his case, and again, it was a fabulous interview, because what he in essence said was, all the things he can control, he's going to make that as good as possible. I can remember, and it's a name that we don't hear much about anymore, when Drayton McLean, who was he was a grocery wholesaler, and he had sold out his company to Walmart. He became very rich, really nice guy, and he bought the Houston Astros. And I remember an interview he did that he went to see an Astros game, and he said there were parts of the experience that weren't what he would like. It was even things like when he got a hot dog, it didn't taste as good as what he wanted. So he upgraded the food. And you and I have been to a lot of ballparks, and there are some, like I know Seattle, the food is spectacular. Baltimore, the team stinks, but you can get a really good crab cake sitting, watching the Orioles lose.
I went to Dodger Stadium, and just about a week ago, and to watch the Mets lose, which seems to be a theme today. And listen, and Dodger Stadium is a great ballpark. It's one of my favorite ballparks. It's fabulous, considering it's the third oldest ballpark in the country, major league ballpark in the country. It's extraordinary how great it is. And the worst part of it was the vaunted Dodger dogs, which was mediocre at best. And they're not paying enough attention to that. And I think that's important. I do have to say, there are two guys. We're talking about the experience. So before the game, people who have watched Dodger games know that Vin Scully, when he was broadcasting the Dodgers before his retirement, for 50 years or something like that, would start out every game by saying, "It's time for Dodger baseball." And now I guess what they do is they bring fans onto the field and hand them a microphone and get them to say, "It's time for Dodger baseball." And they brought these two old cockers onto the field. And apparently they have been season ticket holders together with the Dodgers for like almost 6 decades. And the two of them, "It's time for Dodger baseball." And they reminded me of us. I figured that's going to be us at some point.
In another week. Well, and Kevin, both you and I, we've had the good experience that we've been to Wrigley Field, right, which is either the oldest or the second oldest ballpark. And for a number of years, their announcer was Harry Carey. And at every game in the bottom of the seventh inning, which for non-baseball fans, that's it's the seventh inning stretch. And Harry Carey would open the window of his booth and with a microphone in the worst possible voice would sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And everybody sang along. Now he's probably been dead 15 years at this point. Right. But what they do is they have no trouble filling the role. They have guests come in. I have been at Cubs games. One time I heard Mickey Rooney sing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." All I could think was, isn't Mickey Rooney dead? But he isn't. And he was singing. Another
he
time.
Is now, by the way, just for the record, he is now dead.
Well, I don't follow Mickey Rooney. Another time I got George Wendt, who was Norm from Cheers, singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game." And I think
Bill Murray does it a couple of times a year.
And when people go to a Cubs game, it's a fabulous stadium. The Cubs have now become one of those bad teams because they sold everybody off. But you go to a Cubs game and there are all these elements to the experience, including that. And I think, again, to conclude our metaphor, when you have points of distinction, things that make you special, double down on them. Right. It may not be singing "Take Me Out to the Ball Game," but there may be things you do in your store, you do with your shoppers. Play them up. Make a tradition, build something special.
Yeah, it's interesting. And one other thing occurred to me, and again, in this case, I was watching a Mets-Giants game. And it was interesting. Somebody was making the observation that the Giants are actually, nobody expected the Giants to be as good as they've been this season. And one of the remarkable things about it is the Giants are actually one of the oldest teams in baseball, in the sense that their average age of their players, they're all vets. And they're playing their hearts out and they're succeeding. And they said that's been a remarkable thing, is that none of this is new for these guys. They've been there before, and they know how to handle the pressure of a pennant race. And I thought, that's another example, boy, about, there's always a run for youth, right? Who's going to be the new young people who are going to drive our businesses? And that's important. It's also important in baseball. But it's also important to have kind of institutional knowledge. It's important to have experience. And I'm not saying that just because you and I are of an age where we'd like our experience to be valued and they pay more attention to that than our age. But I think that's an important, again, another important business lesson from this particular baseball season.
And especially as we talk about all the generations meeting in the workforce. I mean, we all know this. The younger generation is very technologically savvy. And no doubt you can hire a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old tomorrow who can do things on social media that a 60-year-old cannot. But a 60-year-old, we have to get people to teach each other their skills. The 60-year-old may be better at making eye contact and making easy conversation with a customer. And so if we get our veterans to teach the younger folks how to do skills they don't have, and maybe the younger folks can teach the older folks how to do TikTok or whatever it might be. But you got to mine all of your talent. And that's why diversity can be such an incredible benefit. It shouldn't be looked down as something that could be a problem. It is something that makes us stronger. It helps us understand the community better. And it may make everybody better workers.
Yeah. Yeah. An investment is in that sort of thing is an investment in the long-term success of a business. It's
very much so.
It's not a pain in the neck because you have special interest groups who are trying to push you around. In this case, yeah, there are special interest groups trying to push you around, but they're trying to get people to recognize that a core, when you talked about this in the beginning of our conversation, right? I mean, the census illustrated that, that we have a more diverse country, and it's only going to get more so going over time. And it was funny that, and I made the point on Morning Newsbeat, at the same time, there was a story in the New York Times about, do supermarkets still need ethnic aisles?
Yeah.
Right? And it's a legitimate question. And there are some retailers who have gotten rid of that stuff, but the broader question is how we think of stores and how we think of consumers and how we think of workforces. It can't be the same way it's been for so many years.
And Kevin, let me build on this in a different direction, because as you and I talk about our concept of the bigger picture, it's always seeing things that we may not know. One of the exciting stories, as you said earlier in this taping today, one of the most exciting stories in baseball this year has been this guy, Shohei Ohtani, for the California Angels, who is both an excellent pitcher and an excellent hitter. And a couple of weeks ago, I was reading a column. It was in the Washington Post by someone, though, who's on the ESPN staff. And he talked about, is Ohtani really like this amazing unicorn? And he said, it's only because we don't know certain bits of history. And he used a name. I had never heard of this guy before. I doubt you have. The guy's name was Ted Radcliffe. And his nickname was Double Duty. He was nicknamed Double Duty by, of all people, the great sports writer, Damon Runyon. Damon Runyon one day attends a doubleheader, and Double Duty catches the first game of the doubleheader, and it's a shutout thrown by none other than Satchel Paige. Second half of the doubleheader, Double Duty was the pitcher and threw a shutout. And in his entire career, Ted Radcliffe was a successful pitcher and a successful hitter. And in fact, what used to be called the Negro Leagues, because obviously African-American players were not allowed in the major leagues, in the Negro Leagues, there were a number of players who, because of economic realities, played 2 and 3 different positions. They caught some of the time, they played the infield, but they also pitched. They were also hitters. And so what we have to recognize is we don't always know everything. What Ohtani is doing this year is incredible because he's demonstrating 2 skills that I will never have. I can't throw a ball anywhere near as hard as he does, and I certainly can't hit the way he does. He does them both. But there have been others. We only know what we know, though. We always, and that's where diversity becomes a benefit, because maybe this isn't the important example, but maybe by having new groups of Hispanics working for you, you will learn about holidays that come up, or foods, or different elements that will make you that much more relevant to this clearly growing part of your community. And the census demonstrates that if you are not in tune with the Hispanic community, with the Asian American community, and certainly the African American community, you are not going to be relevant long term. Yeah. Well, this is what you have to do.
I'll bet you serious money, and in my case, serious money is $5, that Double Duty Radcliffe knew how to bunt down the third baseline.
Oh, without question.
Without question.
And probably did it all the time.
That's right. All right. Well, listen, this has been great. I hope that our audience has enjoyed this trip into some stuff that's, maybe a little off the beaten path, a little bit outside the baselines, but I think I'd like to think that these metaphors are important in terms of how we sort of think about business and focus on business. So this will end up being another section of the new book, and we'll always, if people write into us and have ideas, we'll certainly incorporate those into our chapters. So that is it for this conversation about the bigger picture. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. So my normal pattern is that I usually take off the week before Labor Day, which is what's next week is going to be. I'm going to be doing that, but I'm going to do something a little different this year, which is each day I'm actually going to post a FaceTime with the content guy video. They're going to be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, whatever. My goal is that they will be observational or aspirational, and maybe even a little inspirational, and hopefully a little provocative. Just looking at one story. You won't get the whole full run of Morning Newsbeat, but hopefully I can take 2, 3, 4 minutes of your time and get you thinking about issues in a different way, and in a way that's applicable to your business. So that will be next week on Morning Newsbeat. In the meantime, Michael, thanks for doing this. I appreciate it. And Michael's column will be back the day after Labor Day. So you have that to look forward to as well. Anyway, that is what, let's hope the Mets are still playing relevant games.
It's going to take a lot, because it's like Peter Pan. We need everyone to clap to bring that theory back to life. Because
if I have to keep watching these games, I keep pulling my hair out, and pretty soon my hairline is going to look like your hairline. Anyway, that's what's on our minds this morning. And as always, we want to know what's on your mind. See you next time, everybody.